back to another episode of ACA Cast. With your host this week, my name is Alex Zito. Thank you for joining with us today. ACA Cast is the official podcast of ACA International, the leading voice of the accounts receivable management industry. The content presented in today's episode is for general reference purposes only. We have a very special show today talking about compliance, more specifically a first-hand account of compliance at ACA International. But before we start today, let me tell you about ACA's All Access Training Zone. You and everyone in your company can now have access to all of ACA's online education for one low price. For more information, please visit our website. Alright, let's get started with this episode. Here's a conversation between ACA member Wendy Badger and ACA Corporate Counsel Kari Barber.
Greetings, ACA podcasters. I am Wendy Badger, the Chief Compliance Officer and Vice President of Corporate Compliance with ECMC Group in Minneapolis. I am beyond delighted today to be here to launch a new initiative from ACA. This marks the first in what will be a series of podcast episodes where we learn more about the ACA Compliance Department, the wonderful folks churning out all sorts of fantastic compliance materials, and the materials themselves, such as the search point documents, the ACA Guide to the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act, the Fair Credit Reporting Act, and the ACA Guide to State Collection Laws and Practices, and not to mention a Compliance Officer of the Day program, and all sorts of other critical pieces of industry news and case law development, most of which is available for free to members as part of your membership dues. And this barely even scratches the surface of what the compliance team does to help ACA members succeed. We're going to pull back that curtain and start this series by introducing you to the intelligent and talented individuals who are doing all of this work for you, the ACA members. You guys, I can't even tell you how excited I am that I have the privilege of introducing you to Kari Barber, Corporate Counsel with ACA International. Thanks for joining me for this inaugural episode, Kari.
Thanks, Wendy Badger. The pleasure is mine, and I am thrilled to be recording this episode with you.
Kari, you crack me up. You are one of the few people who always call me by my full name. I don't understand it, I don't get it, but I like it, so we'll keep that in. Full disclosure here, though, Kari Barber and I have a shared history. So earlier in my career when I was in private practice at a law firm, Kari was a law clerk at that same firm when she was going to law school. So we go back quite a ways. We're not going to say how far back.
Watch yourself, Wendy.
We're not going to say how far back. We'll just say go back a ways. But Kari, you're relatively new to the ACA staff, but not new to the credit and collection industry. So what interested you in working for the association?
Good question. So a whole host of things drew me to ACA, and the most obvious one, I think, and you may have heard of it as well as our listeners, but it's the proposed debt collection rules. What an opportunity I have been given to participate with many of the industry leaders to shape the direction of the industry through association efforts. The proposed rules, and then later the actual final rule, will impact this industry for years to come, and I am so excited that I get to be a part of that. I also appreciate Mark's vision for the association. I think he's taken it to a really good place. I really clicked with ESA and think I can learn a lot from him, and not just about the industry concerns, but also just the general corporate matters that ESA works on from a day-to-day.
That's great. Yeah, Mark and I actually go way back too, even further back than Kari and you and I go, back to when Mark was an agency owner. And it's really great to see his transition from that agency ownership into leading the association in a new direction. So that's awesome. You're now managing the members attorney program. You're involved with the board of directors and corporate governance. You're leading the compliance function at ACA, among a number of other responsibilities, and we'll get into that in a few minutes. What have you been most impressed with since you joined ACA?
Before I joined ACA, I was amazed with the staff. I continue to be amazed by the output of quality products and education and service that the staff provides ACA members. And I've received such an outpouring of support from the members themselves, starting from my very first day. It really is a collegial environment all around. Our members drive our ambition to make industry changes and support us every step of the way. Continue to be impressed with the staff that I have the pleasure of now leading and the quality work that they put out. And I look forward to leading them in a direction that our members are kind of hinting at this point. But like I said, the members have been absolutely fabulous in welcoming me aboard and taking me under their wing and offering their help whenever I need it.
That's fantastic. And, as former ACA staff myself, I concur with just how amazing that ACA staff is. And I think one thing that the membership doesn't always realize is how lean that staff is, with how much product and service and helpfulness and the meetings and all that ACA cranks out. It's amazing how few people work there and just how dedicated they are. You mentioned how supportive the membership is, when they reached out to you when you first started. At their heart, they're competitors too. Sometimes they're competing for the same business, but you bring them together at an industry event, and it is such a supportive network, and it's just really amazing to see how they all come together to drive the association and its vision forward. So I think that's great.
It's very much unbelievable on all those fronts. Like you said, the lean staff around here and just the want and the desire to do more for the members and their strategic vision for the association, and the members too. They're obviously helping to drive that process, and they're behind us every step of the way. How can you not succeed in a role like this or with this association with such great leadership?
Yeah, I think everyone there at ACA really embraces that motto of helping members succeed. Tell me, what's a typical day at work like for Kari Barber?
What I do appreciate about this role is that it's forever changing. It keeps me on my toes. It's challenging. It's exciting. From being the staff liaison for the MAP committee as well as the judicial committee, there was always something to be done. The MAP committee is thinking about new ways to engage members, to engage the committee to do different things for membership, to the judicial committee, who is constantly looking at industry trends and how we can shape that. From being a liaison and farming out requests from those two committees, I've also been, on a day-to-day basis, I'm working on the FDCPA guide, which we are just finishing up now and getting ready to roll that out. We're looking at future projects that we can do for members, general business-related matters. So it changes from day to day, and I think that that's why I love my job so much at this point, is because I feel like I have my fingers in all these different things. I'm just like a little sponge. I'm learning all sorts of different things, and I have crazy ideas, fun ideas that I'm hoping that I can share with others at some point. So it's great. It's fun. It's fantastic. I love it.
That sounds like a ton of variety to really keep you busy, and I'm no stranger to crazy ideas myself, so I think that's great, all designed around, again, helping those members succeed. And, you mentioned, too, there's been a lot of change in the industry lately, not just from technology advancements, but you mentioned the promulgation of the proposed debt collection rules. There's the proliferation of TCPA cases. Fair Credit Reporting Act cases are on the rise. There's a lot going on from a litigation perspective. You're involved with the Industry Advancement Fund, too, I believe, which help contribute some funds or do friend of the court types of briefs with different issues of industry-wide significance. There's a lot going on in the industry, and I know you joined ACA kind of right in the middle of all of the commotion of the comment period for the CFPB's proposed debt collection rules. And now that that comment period has closed, well, I know that took up quite a bit of your time, doing webinars and diving into the 538 plus pages of content. And now that that comment period has closed and as we await the final rules, what do you see as some of the industry's biggest challenges right now?
Downright uncertainty of the circus that is Washington, D.C. Like you said, there was so much attention being placed on the proposed debt collection rules that we we can't lose sight, such as individual state privacy, the continually developing inconsistent case law. And like you mentioned, that's why the Industry Advancement Program, what an amazing program that ACA has for its members, and I've been incredibly impressed with that program and those spearheading that effort and jumping on board and supporting our members in the litigation, or like you said, as a friend of the court in amicus briefs, and trying to shape that landscape, trying to shape the industry trends over a period of time, obviously make it easier for our businesses to run their businesses and be compliant. And especially the FCC actions or lack thereof, I would say, related to the TCPA and the definition of auto dialers. We got a lot of work to do there. Then there's the legislation in Congress attempting to address bad robocalls, but in the mix, it jeopardizes legitimate calls that consumers want or need to receive, and also that our members need to get out to the consumers. It's very frustrating for them to have to continue to take the hits from Congress. I guess uncertainty and where we go next is probably our biggest challenge at this point. We have some ideas in mind. We have some great people spearheading that effort, and hopefully in the long run, we'll get through to Congress through our advocacy efforts and through our litigation efforts.
As you were talking, Kari, I couldn't help but sit here and just nod right along with you. I mean, you are hitting so many of those critical points that as someone who's in-house dealing with this stuff and trying to figure out from a compliance perspective, what do we do to implement this stuff? Just like nodding along. And I know for me, that's one of the frustrating things is I don't have answers when the business units come to me and say, what do we do about this? I don't know. How risk averse or risk tolerant do we want to be? That's a big issue right now that we continue to face, even with the debt collection rules. Well, what do we need to change? Well, they're only proposed at this point. We don't know. But it's a good opportunity to really engage with vendors and figure out what our systems can handle and what we need to go talk with our vendors about. What are we going to do in-house? How do we need to maybe potentially change things, and what our risk tolerance for that kind of stuff, especially as it comes to emails and different types of technology.
I agree that I think that many of our members feel as though they are in limbo right now. They're not sure what is risk averse, what is the most riskiest route to take. Courts seem to be at odds with each other, and they seem to be at odds with some of the things that Congress is doing. It is a very frustrating time for our members, but like we said, we're working through that, and we're making the best decisions that we can and hoping to help our members run their businesses compliantly.
So now that the debt collection rules comment period has closed, what's the current big ticket item that's taking up most of your time?
Well, like I mentioned, we did just finalize the revised version of the FTCPA guide. So I'm really, really proud of that product. It contains, updated case law. It's been quite some time, but it updates case law, the significant analysis into that case law from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. But now that that's even done and off my plate, I'm turning my focus to some of the other guides that ACA offers, the TCPA guide, the FCRA guide, as well as looking into some additional search points that we can provide for our members. A lot of those big ticket items have passed, and what a fun project that those both were, but now it's kind of an opportunity to take a step back and look at what could benefit our members most as we go through these tumultuous times between Congress legislation and the courts and the decisions that they are making that seem to be in contravention of each other across the country. Like I said, the FTCPA guide, I'm really excited to roll that one out because it also does, embedded throughout that guide are the proposed rules. And although they're not binding, they're not finalized at this point, at least our members have the opportunity to have a one-stop shop where they can go and take a look at what the current law is, an analysis of the current law in respect to case law that has come down, but then also to look at the proposed rules and say, okay, this is what might change in the event these rules were to become final and how it changes from the existing law. So I think that's a great product for all members to have, whether it be, collection agencies, creditors, you name it. It's a good product to have.
Yeah, that is such a huge effort to synthesize and analyze all of that, not only the case law under the FDCPA, but, there's contradictory opinions that you mentioned. So sometimes even within the same district or jurisdiction, so it can be hard for members to know what to do. I think another critical point, it's interesting that you've incorporated those proposed rules into the FDCPA manual, and I think that's great because those rules are not meant to, even once they're finalized, they're not meant to replace the FDCPA. They're designed to clarify and enhance it, like to supplement it. And I think there's been some confusion in the industry about that the FDCPA is not going away. So I think that makes the FDCPA guide that much more critical to an organization's business, even for your creditor members to know what the collection agencies need to deal with and how creditors might be able to partner better with their collection agencies to give them the information that they need to be able to effectively collect on those debts.
You got it, Wendy. Yeah, the FDCPA is definitely, the statute itself isn't going anywhere. This is just the Bureau's attempt to try and provide some guidance. So much has changed since the FDCPA was originally enacted as far as modern technology is concerned. So, like you said, while the statute itself isn't going to go away, hopefully the Bureau can provide some guidance as to how to implement certain modern technologies to communicate with consumers. And these are consumer-preferred communications. Most of us these days are tied to our phones or tied to our emails, and that's how we prefer communication. I'm hopeful that the Bureau is taking that into consideration. And by my read of the proposed rules, that's kind of exactly what they're doing. The FDCPA doesn't expressly prohibit the use of this modern technology, but we need some guidance as to how to use it compliantly. So yeah, I think that's a real good selling point, or one of the selling points for the FDCPA guide is just this one-stop shop where members can get everything all in one guide and find all the answers that they're looking for and their compliance needs.
So, Kari, just for my own curiosity, so the content has been enhanced. What's the format of the guide? You know, the last version, it had like the two separate versions where it had more like articles and descriptions, and then volume 2, I think, was like the descriptions and summaries of the case law. Is it still in a 2-volume format, or is the format and content different?
It is different. We decided to go a bit of a different route. While the case law is still included in the guide, some cases there will be summary of those big ticket cases. You know, more excited about the analysis of that case law and how that affects their current practices or how that affects a specific provision of the FTCPA. So the secondary guide that has the case and its summary, all that can still be found in the guide, just at a more micro level. But we thought our members would be more interested in learning about not just the summary of what that case is, but how does that impact their practices? How does that impact how they're currently doing their business, or if at all? And then also to see the distinction from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, because as you know, many of our members, most of our members are collecting across the country. What's going on in the Third Circuit isn't necessarily what's going on in the Ninth Circuit. So we kind of want to have that side-by-side comparison for our members to make it easy for them to find the information that they're looking for and to feel confident in the content that we're providing them, that they can go forth with their business practices, obviously with considering their own practices, at least a starting point for them to feel like they're being compliant with the FTCPA.
I love that. I love that. That whole question about what does this mean for me? How does this impact my business? That is so critical. So I think that's great. And even if you're located in the 8th Circuit, you might be collecting in the 5th Circuit. And how does that impact you? That's going to definitely benefit the ACA membership. So that's a real big ticket item. One of the other big ticket items that we touched on earlier, and arguably, as you've mentioned, one of the biggest items we've seen in the industry since probably since the FTCPA itself was enacted, and that's occupied most of the industry's time and attention until mid-September when those comments were due, was those CFPB's proposed debt collection rules. What were you most surprised or excited about from the proposed rules?
Not a whole lot surprised me. More of it excited me than surprised me. But limited content messages. As you know, the industry has seen a ton of litigation surrounding what agencies can and cannot say when they're trying to reach a consumer. So I was very happy to see the Bureau address that particular issue for the industry as a whole, and what can and cannot be said, and how we can go about trying to communicate to a consumer without violating the FTCPA. Appreciate the Bureau's, like I said, attempt to provide guidance when using modern technology when trying to communicate with consumers. These are consumer-preferred methods of communication, and to be able to utilize those at least impact to the consumers, I think is really important.
I completely agree with you. I think that the legitimate businesses, the ACA member organizations, have just kind of been begging for, just tell us the rules and we'll follow them. The industry is changing, technology is changing, and I think it's really great that the CFPB is recognizing that in these rules and trying to bring that 40-plus-year-old statute into the way the times are changing. Kari, I teased a little bit earlier that you and I go way back. So personally, I know how fantastic you are, and I could sit here and sing your praises all day long, but the ACA membership is really just getting a small glimpse of that in this interview. And I mentioned that while you're new to ACA staff, ACA is not your first or your only foray into the debt collection space. You have debt collection experience, including bankruptcy adversary defense work, collection and FTCPA defense litigation. You've got compliance exposure, got a really great and varied background. Can you tell us a little bit more about the pre-ACA Kari Barber?
Wendy, you've always been my biggest cheerleader, but I actually began my legal career practicing administrative law and consumer bankruptcy, of all things. My first taste in the collection industry, it didn't come until a few years into my legal career when I took a job as an associate attorney at a full-service collection firm here in the Twin City area. That experience was so exciting, so challenging, that I was completely hooked at that job. I'm hooked on this industry is what I mean. And every day was so different. I learned some of the most intricate details about call centers and litigating consumer debt. So I then applied those skills to my last position as corporate counsel with ECMC, a guarantee agency. I was able to continue honing my litigation skills, but just as important, I learned something new. I learned compliance. I learned how to be proactive versus reactive. And I would be remiss, Wendy Badger, if I failed to mention that my compliance skills I learned from you. You turned me on to the compliance arena and how to change my focus, how to change my thought process from a proactive versus a reactive. Now, don't get me wrong, I still love litigation. I love a good lawsuit, especially when I'm on the winning side. But I do appreciate comes from the front end and trying to avoid those lawsuits. So working at ACA, coming to ACA really was a natural transition in my career. I get to continue working in an industry that I love and during one of the most exciting times since the FDCPA and even the TCPA were enacted. There is so much going on, and I'm thrilled to be a part of it and working with ACA on it.
Kari, you know I've always been a big fan of yours, and you have such great experience with really impressive skills to back it up, and I'm so glad that the ACA membership gets to see and experience that firsthand. I'm sure I sound at this point like a broken record, but the association is really lucky to have you and to have you,
Thank you.
Not just that skills and experience, but your personality and your spark are so just infectious and contagious, and you're just a fun person. So when you're not at ACA, what hobbies and interests occupy your time?
I am married with 2 children, and this last year was my daughter's first year in competition dance. So in addition to being constantly covered in glitter, I've learned a lot about the demands of competition dance, not just on the dancers, my daughter, but also on the family, the practices, the performance, the competitions, it all adds up. And then my son, he just turned 4, so as you can imagine, he is just a ball of energy who definitely keeps me on my toes. He's a fun one. I have a dog, Suki. She's a nugget of a thing, a miniature dachshund, and then I also have a cat. In addition to all that, I decided it wasn't enough. I should probably do something more. Earlier this year, actually, I was appointed to the Bloomington Human Rights Commission by the Bloomington City Council, and I was on their committee to revise their bylaws to kind of bring them up to the times. So I sat on that committee, was able to be really engaged in that process, and it's a great committee to be on. They're doing a lot of great things.
I'm exhausted just listening to that. Like, how you find time in the day for all that. And, you know, you'd mentioned that your husband, but I just want to give a shout out to Justin Barber because he's pretty fantastic in his own right. And you can feel free to tell him I said that.
I will. He'll be thrilled to hear from you.
I love how you just kind of light up and you can see your inner sparkle when you talk about your family and your passions and especially your kids, who, by the way, adore Wendy Badger. I might just throw that plug in there for myself.
That they do. I will second that. That is no joke.
What's one thing we haven't talked about that you would like ACA members to know about yourself?
I know you're probably not going to let this interview end without some mention that I'm royalty. Now, before anyone gets too excited,
you got that right.
But before anyone gets too excited, allow me to explain. In middle school, I was crowned the inaugurating Scottsbluff County Fair Queen. It was kind of a big deal because of my title. I was able to meet Toby Keith and parade around the rodeo on a horse-drawn carriage, waving and smiling, just like you see with the big-time queens these days. Since that time, I've put up my tiara, and I've actually taken up gardening. So currently, I like to garden, whether it be planting perennials, annuals, or a vegetable garden. That's my flavor these days.
Oh, Kari, I'm so glad you brought that up so I didn't have to. But I would say, I don't think you've really ever hung up your tiara. I would say, but it sounds to me like you wear multiple different hats, from being a wife to being a mother to being a gardener to being the corporate counsel for ACA to being on the Bloomington Human Rights Commission. All of these different roles that you play, you're just putting on a different tiara at different parts of the day. It has just been such a pleasure to talk with you today, and I know
this has been really fun.
I know we could go on for hours, but I'm sure Alex is, you know, sitting there rolling his eyes going, you guys got to wrap this up. But,
sorry, Alex.
Sorry, Alex. But truly, Alex, we could not do this without your help. So we really ought to, you know, give him his credit too. So thank you, Alex, for helping us coordinate this today. But truly, and all joking aside, it has been just my honor to have this opportunity to introduce the ACA membership to Kari Barber in particular, and to launch this podcast series that highlights the ACA Compliance Department and all of just the wonderful and amazing things that they do to help members succeed. And like I mentioned earlier, this is barely the tip of the iceberg of all of the amazing things that you guys do. And I know I'm certainly looking forward to getting my hands on that newly updated FDCPA manual. So thank you, Alex, for running all the technical aspects of today's podcast and editing out all of my flubs and foibles. And special thanks to my guest today, the amazing Kari Barber, ACA's Corporate Counsel. I appreciate you sharing your time and your story with me and with the ACA membership and the podcast listeners. So we hope that you enjoyed this debut episode of Getting to Know the ACA Compliance Department, and we look forward to next time.
And thank you, Wendy Badger. Thanks for being you.
I wouldn't be anyone else.
Thank you, Wendy and Kari. If you enjoyed this episode, you can subscribe to ACA Cast in iTunes or wherever you download your podcast so you'll never miss a show. While you're at it, if you found value in the show, we appreciate a ratings on iTunes, or simply tell a coworker or a friend about the show. That will really help us out too. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you next time on ACA Cast.